Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and if it wasn't already panic stations at Demonland, then we are now at DEFCON 2. And no, I am not talking about the geopolitical climate of the world. I'm talking about the end of an era at our beloved footy club. Joining me tonight to dissect another insipid performance by the Dees, George. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening to B-Man. Good evening to all our faithful listeners. Well, this week I was looking to buy a DeLorean so that it could take me back to 2021, but unfortunately somebody set the dials for 2013 because that's exactly what I saw out on the MCG being performed this week. So, we're right back to the worst of it.
Yeah, I think somebody crashed that DeLorean. It's out of juice. Might need to find a lightning storm to get us kick-started. And while you do that, spare a thought for our beloved Bin Man, who's finally maybe getting a taste of some good old dose of MFCSS. It gets the best of us, buddy. Good evening, Bin Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Good evening, Demonlanders. Well, Andy, hope springs a pretty big leak, I have to say. I wouldn't quite say that I've gone MFCSS, but I will preface any comments tonight because I feel like that I will definitely be trying to look for the positive because I don't want to sort of have a funeral of a episode, but I tell you what, I was as frustrated as I've been for a long, long time leaving the MCG on Saturday. I was furious at a lot of the mistakes, but really, I said to a guy I was sitting there, we talked about how we thought we might go, and I said to him, look, I'm genuinely not sure, which one is a bad sign. And what I really meant was effort, and then I said, but we'll be able to tell in the first 3-4 minutes. And, you often can tell early in games, can't you? And it just seemed off right from the get-go, and, we'll get into it. But and I know it's funny, there's no question about the umpires this week, and maybe it's, like I was irritated with lots of things, how we were playing, and I was unusually frustrated with Steve May. I thought he had an absolute stinker, and, it's probably, to be fair to him, when it's waltzing out of the middle like it was, it's pretty hard to be a key defender. But so I was irritated anyway, but the umpiring, I look, it didn't have any bearing on the result. They fully deserved to win. But it was just so infuriating, the stand of the umpiring, and it was on top of my growing frustration through the match. And the AFL's got to do something about it. It's just too many games I go to and think, look, this is just woeful. It's such an important part of the game, and it was so frustrating.
Well, full disclosure, I had a wedding this weekend on Saturday. So me and another diehard tragic Demon supporter we were watching the first bit of the game while we could. It was sort of that in between the ceremony and the actual function. And I didn't get to watch much more after that, except the score ticking over, and usually a point for us while 2 goals would come up on there. And I've only watched a little bit of highlights. So tonight I'm going to be taking a step back and letting you guys do the talking about the game stuff, because I didn't get to watch the full game, and I'll tell you now, I will never be watching that game in any capacity, except to watch some highlights of young Harvey Langford, who, congratulations, he got the nomination for the Round 3 Rising Star Award, so congratulations to him.
Any chance you could find someone else getting married on Friday that we could?
I tell you what,
whose wedding we could attend.
I won't, and I never do go down the freeway to Geelong. I like to watch the Geelong games in the comfort of my living room, and that's exactly where I'll be doing it this week. But the remote will be very close by, and I might either throw it at the TV or just turn it off.
It's fans like you, Andy. Fans like you.
No, I of course I watch it, but I had no choice this weekend, and was probably saved. Let's just get it.
25,000 people turned up, and I thought it was a pretty good crowd, to be honest. And that's one thing. As we talked about last week, I'm over us getting, or the week before I'm over us, the D's getting knocked for not turning up. 25,000 to see the Suns, to us play the Suns after we got touched up for a previous week by the Roos is a pretty good effort. So for any of the Demonland listeners who were there, good on you. It was a good turnout, I reckon, and it's a real pity that the team didn't pay us back or repay some of our effort.
Yeah, I think those crowd jibes that we get isn't so much. I guess they see the 24,000, in the paper at the thing, but other clubs sort of get that against these type of teams. But I think what happens is on the TV, because when it's a Melbourne home game, you have the MCC and you have our home premium home members on that side. The AFL members looks very sparse on the TV, and I guess they see glimpses of that and think, where are all the Melbourne supporters? So as I've said, I'd love for Melbourne games for the cameras to be on the other side of the ground. That might get us, might score us some points.
Well, that's what, funnily enough, just as a complete aside, what was interesting about the Roos game is it was actually quite crowded where I was sitting in the end, is that there was no one there 10 minutes before the game, and then suddenly it was stacked, and I looked up and it was packed on the opposite wing to where the cameras are, and they had at Marvel, and they had the top deck at Marvel completely closed on the television side. So the cameras must have been pointing at a full Marvel stadium on the other side.
All right, well, let's get into the housekeeping stuff that we do each week. And each week I do invite our loyal listeners to support the podcast by leaving us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts. We truly appreciate your feedback. And as a token of our gratitude, we give a well-deserved shout-out to those who do take the time to share their reviews. And our friend of the show, Monocular, writes, weekly must for Demon Tragics. I have lost count of the number of years I've been following this essential part of demonic existence, but I never miss an episode, win, lose or draw. Especially in grim times such as this week, one can sometimes get a feeling of a light at the end of the tunnel, and that not being the oncoming train. With the boys' expert analysis, and there can be a sense of optimism in the gloom. Thanks, guys, so much for your dedication and hard work. Don't always agree with everything you say, but that makes life more interesting. If we always agreed, it would be boring, and it certainly is not that. Go Demons. Well, thanks for that, Monocular. And this podcast, as I always say, is an extension of the Demonland forums. And if the sentiment there is anything to go by, we aren't always going to agree with one another, and that's fine. And keep that feedback coming. Simply leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcast, and we will give you a shout out on the show. If you follow us on Facebook, Instagram or Twitter and you want to leave feedback, ask a question, share a comment for the show, you can do that under our weekly podcast post, or just slide into our DMs. And don't worry, we won't read out your full name on the air. You can download and listen to the Demonland podcast on Apple, Google or Spotify, or any of your favourite podcasting apps. In addition, you can also watch and listen to us on YouTube. Just search for the Demonland podcast to find our channel, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And you want to connect with other passionate D's fans, and if you haven't checked out our forum, head on over to demonland.com, sign up, join in the conversation with fellow D supporters from across Australia and around the world. It's completely free, and in addition to posting questions or comments for the show, you'll find endless discussions on all things Melbourne Demons. And if you want to jump on the air tonight and have your say on any of the topics that we're going to be covering, and while I say that, I'm going to fire up Skype. Just give us a call on 0390163666. That's 0390163666. I'll answer. I'll put you on mute and bring you in when there's a break in the conversation. You can also call that number anytime during the week and leave us a message. We'll play it on the show. And as I mentioned the other week, Skype is shutting down in May, so I've got to find a solution. If anyone knows of any solutions where you can have a number and have someone call in to a podcast, let me know.
Just a reminder to our listeners, our chat room's back up and running tonight too.
I was just about to get to that, George.
Oh, sorry.
You stepped on my toes. A chat room is back, so if you want to listen live, if you are listening live, come join us in the chat room, demonland.com/podcast, and be a part of the discussion in real time. We go live every Monday night at 8 p.m. So if you want to catch the show as it happens, head on over to demonland.com and tune in. Let's get into the match overview. The Demons faced the Suns at the MCG on Saturday, enduring a significant 58-point defeat. The loss marked Melbourne's first loss to the Suns in over a decade. It was 2014. The Demons struggled from the outset, conceding early goals due to undisciplined play, including 250-metre penalties. The scoring inefficiency was evident, with the team registering 4 consecutive behinds to start the game and managing only 2 goals 9 by half-time. First-year midfielder Harvey Langford was a standout for the D, showcasing his prowess in contested situations and providing a rare highlight in an otherwise disappointing team performance. The talented youngster Xavier Lindsay, who in just a few matches has shown his great decision-making and lethal left foot, suffered a knee injury in the first quarter, adding to the Demons' woes. Out of form forward Bailey Fritsch had another off day, missing 2 straightforward set shots and dropping an uncontested mark near goal, finishing the day with 3 behinds. And despite Max Gawn winning the hit-out, Melbourne's midfielders were outperformed by the Suns' young on-ball brigade, losing the clearance count 24-40. The Demons' performance was once again marred by fundamental errors, including fumbling, poor decision-making and a lack of cohesion. Their inefficiency in front of goal and inability to capitalise on scoring opportunities were particularly concerning. The team's defensive structures also faltered, allowing Suns forward Ben King to capitalise and contribute significantly to Gold Coast tally. This defeat raises alarm bells at Melbourne about Melbourne's form and game plan early in the season. However, the anticipated returns of players like Kasai Pickett, Caleb Windsor, Judd McVie and Jake Lever offer some optimism. The Demons will need to address their skill, execution, discipline and overall game plan to rebound in the coming weeks. The emergence of Harvey Langford and the encouraging news that Xavier Lindsay has avoided an ACL injury offer rare glimmers of hope in what is fast becoming a disastrous 2025 season. Well, big man, if you want to get straight into your stats files. Now, I'm not sure, did you see there is a question just regarding champion data stats? Do you want me to tackle that after the stats, or you want to get into it?
I did see that question. It's about the tackling.
Yeah, so the Jackson Fix, there's probably not an answer for this, but Jackson Fix asks, is there champion data stats on broken tackles? Sides are either smashing through our tackles or getting arms clear for an effective possession like I've never seen. Is there champion data stats for number of throws? Why are we getting caught throwing it so much? Quick ball movement, I understand, but we're not the first side to try and move it at pace from contest. So, big man, anything in the stats about these?
There isn't on throws, but there is on broken tackles. So Champion Data, which is AFL partly owned, I'm pretty sure, I keep saying that, but I'm pretty sure that they at least own some shares in Champion Data.
Yep.
And this is just such a pet hate of mine, and like beyond pet hate, it's like a zoo hate. And I really, really dislike what they do with data, and you know that they lock so much of this up. So much of the data that's collected is driven by what the clubs want, and the clubs don't want it released. And this is an example. So Champion Data do track broken tackles, and it's defined as instances where a player attempting to tackle fails to impede the ball carrier, allowing them to maintain possession and execute a disposal. 2024, Harley Reid, he broke 7 tackles in a single game, which is pretty impressive for a first-year player. The record, by the by, is Luke Davis, Uniac, and Dustin Martin have both broke 8 in a match. So they do have that data. What's frustrating me is that data is not available to the public, and it drives me nuts. There's any number of such data points. So the clubs really take a big interest in that particular stat for a range of reasons. You know, I think the question picks up the reasons, but there's no publicly data available. And what they'll occasionally do, and again, it's this sort of parasitic relationship between Champion Data and the AFL, is they'll drip feed little bits of information out, like the most number of broken tackles being 8 and that sort of stuff. You know, little bits that we'll see in an article, and there'll be an occasional article, you know, focusing on one of these data points, and it just drives me nuts. Just release the data and let people get into it who want to get into it and analyse it. But as I said, it's another data point that the clubs asked for, and the clubs don't want that information out. So I just think the AFL are doing the sport and fans who follow it a real disservice by not making all data available. That's all data that they collect available, or if they're not going to let Champion Data do it, free it up for other people to collect that data, but they lock anyone else out of the process. So really frustrating. So yeah, there is a stat for it, and I reckon we'd be down the bottom of that particular table because it was another game, wasn't it, where we just, players were breaking through tackles. I mean, you count Rao must have broken through bloody half a dozen tackles just by himself. Really frustrating from that perspective. So yeah, there is a stat for that. All right, the stats file, the good, the bad, and the ugly, starting this week again with just a quick look at the player ratings. Again, like I said last week, I put a lot of store in who plays well in matches where the team plays poorly, and also just other couple of things that, I recognise that, as I said a couple of weeks ago when I was giving how they define, how they come to these scores, is that it disadvantages sort of key position players. So just sort of that's for a range of reasons. But so just keep that in the back pocket in terms of when I speak to some of these. But I put a lot of store in players who play well in when the team plays poorly. And so I was really thrilled with Bowie's game. He was our highest rated player, 18.1. Terrific game. I thought his effort was fantastic the whole match. I love the fact he had 7.7 player rating points in the first quarter. And he was one of the few players, as I'm just looking down the list now, I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's about 5 players, 6, 7, about 6 players, who had their best quarter in the last quarter. The rest all fell away, which reflecting the way we played, I think. So he had 7.7 in the first quarter, then levelled off and had 5.3 in the last. So it wasn't better than the first, but he was up there. The other one, interestingly, was Van Ruin, who had a howler. I thought it was a shocker. He just seems to be completely out of confidence. But he had a great last quarter, so he ended up with 9.3 points, which is about his average as an AFL player, a bit under. No, it's actually about his average. But his last quarter was 6.3, and so he took a couple of good marks. He kicked a goal, and that's what you want from him. Hopefully that's a positive sign. He can bring that form forward, because he just looks lost at the moment. He's not timing the ball properly in his jump, so he's all over the shop. So the top 5 players were Jake Bowie, 18.1. Again, there was a big drop to the second player. Trent Rivers, 14.8. One of the things I like about these player ratings, as I said last week, is that sometimes it disabuses me of my assumptions a little bit, and I wasn't super impressed with his game live. So it's interesting that he rated pretty highly. Third was Harvey Langford, just above track, 14.7. Fantastic game of footy by the young player, including 6.4 points in the third quarter. Fourth was Track, who I didn't actually think had such a good game, but he was our 4th rated highest player. And Sharp had a much better game. He rounded out our top 5 with 11.9 points, a much better game than at least on the player ratings than I had sort of thought live. And so that was a real positive. And again, Tommy McDonald had a great game, 11.6 above his AFL average. Just a comment about a couple of players, and I know we're going to talk about Fritter later, so I won't go on about it, but he had another shocker, at least in terms of player ratings. He 0.4. And here's a little bit of a curious one. Xavier Lindsay, who came off at what point of the game did he come off, Andy? Do you know?
About 2 minutes in, I'd say.
About 2 minutes into the game, Xavier Lindsay came off, and he was not our lowest scoring player.
Wow.
Any guesses who our lowest scoring player was?
Well, I won't be able to guess.
George?
Oh, it's too many to choose from in this particular case.
Bailey Fritsch, I'll say.
Yeah.
Although he kicked points.
So Fritter he was our 4th lowest player, Fritter. So then underneath Fritter was Aidan Johnson, 0.4, equal 4th, so 0.4 points. Xavier Lindsay, was 0.1. He got that in the first quarter, was off after no more than 90 seconds, 2 minutes, which I just could not believe. So just on that, I'm so thrilled that it's not long term. I just thought for sure it was ACL. I was just absolutely accepting of the fact, well, not accepting, I was expecting totally them to come out. I just looked at all the world like an ACL. So that made me so happy, actually. That was such a good bounce back from where I was when I heard that news. On the bottom, with negative 2.7 player rating points. And just to remember, the summary is, it's in short, the short version of how they arrive at it is each time they have any intervention or football act, whether how that contributes or not to a score. That's how they arrive at the player ratings, is that his total match score was minus 2.7. He had only one quarter where he was above minus, so 0.6 in the second quarter. And as I said, I don't want to be overly critical of players, but I just thought he had a mare position.
Who was it, Ben Man?
Oh, sorry, Stephen Maisie. He just had a shocker, and this is one example where I probably was more critical and more vocal against Steve May than I've been at a game of footy for a long time, I reckon. Maybe it was my general irritability, but he just seemed to be out of position all the time, and he kept on playing King from in front. And they were moving the ball basically over the top of him. His body language was all over the shop. One example where the player ratings completely aligned with what my eyes told me on the game, and I just thought it was a howler from a senior player. So a fair bit to watch there, and we'll unpack that a little bit later with the question about defensive. So good. And this is a good one, actually. So, and we'll talk about the game plan in a bit more detail later. So this is really good. We had 30 points from our defensive half. Doesn't sound huge, but they only scored 2 more points from their defensive half. They scored 32 points. So 30 points from our defensive half. So some context for why that's good is that our season average so far, albeit 3 games only, is 20. So it's 10 points above our average. This is what we're trying to move towards. We're trying to move from scoring from a defensive half. And for a further bit of context is that on the ladder for scores from the back half, we're 18th from defensive half. So 30 puts your averages of 30 or 33 is about mid-table. So that's exactly what we want to be doing in terms of, what Goody's trying to do. So it's it's nothing to write home about. The best teams are averaging 55, I think is on the top of the table from scores from the back half. And that's Adelaide are on top. No surprise there, probably, with the way they're playing their footy. So defensive scores from defensive half is a key indicator for what Goody's trying to do in terms of developing a game plan that's going to be competitive in 2025. So 30 points doesn't sound huge, but it's 10 points up on our average. It puts us about mid-table if we were to average that. And the Suns only scored 32 points from their defensive half. So that's good. There's no question about that. Bad. Now, I could have picked any, but most of the stats fall into ugly, to be honest. So under bad stat, our pressure and contested work, again, just wasn't up for it. And this is probably the hardest thing to sort of come to terms with in terms of our performance this week, and to a lesser degree last week. I was 10 times, 100 times more infuriated with this performance than last week. Our pressure rating for the match was down 1, pretty average, 174, 200 being elite. It's interesting because if you transition the ball more, you have less contests, and therefore your pressure rating drops off a little bit. But nonetheless, 174 isn't going to get the job down. We were negative 18 for contested possessions. That's just woeful. Our ground ball is negative 12. And I've talked a lot over the last few years about post-clearance contested possessions. One of the fascinating things I found about this game is Hardwick was coaching them. We borrowed our game plan wholly from them and put our tweaks on it. I think we had a better defensive zone than them in 21 than they ever did. But it was their template that forward half reliance on contests. The number one stat that Hardwick still loves post-clearance contested possessions. We were negative 9. They killed us ahead of the ball, like after winning the clearances, absolutely smashed us ahead of the ball. And what was interesting, as I said, tactically, is that they played very much like I think Goody wants us to play, very similar. So still lots of contests, still lots of pressure, relatively forward half. And there's a question a bit later about how to break down the sort of dynamic back half play that Adelaide are doing. Like I said there, I think Adelaide are averaging 55 points from their defensive half. So, the way Suns play like a hybrid model. I think that's the way that Goody wants to play as well. So ugly. Well, there was a bunch of things I could have chosen for ugly, but the things I landed on was our third quarter pressure rating was just 164 and minus 17. So 181 in that quarter, the premiership quarter. I was so infuriated with our body language and how we came out after half time. I thought, well, we're lucky to be in the game. They'd missed some chances. Of course, we missed our chances again, but I thought, okay, let's see how we've gone. Have we reset? And we just looked sort of poor in that quarter in terms of the pressure we were. And one of the most notable things is people aren't pressing up on the ball carrier and putting them under pressure. And so 164 in that quarter was just not good enough, simply not good enough. Scores from stoppages. Now, I talked a lot about, it's not about the raw number of clearances. That's important in the sense that clearances give you territory, but we often play one down or at the stoppage and drop one behind the ball. So we've always been sort of historically over the last few years, we often lose the total number of clearances. What we don't lose is scores from stoppages. And there's 2 weeks in a row this has happened. We were down 36 from scores from stoppages. Awful, just awful, including 24 from centre clearances. We only scored 2 points from centre clearances. So they killed us out of the centre. It was just soul-destroying to watch, but down 36 from stoppages is just a nightmare, particularly, we were down 18 for contested possessions, but still, so just awful. Our turnover points, we were down 27 again. We gave up 58 points on turnover. So those two, that's where we lost the game. That's it. That's exactly the margin. So we actually matched them from ball movement from the back half, but we got decimated from stoppages and decimated again from turnovers. So down 27. So that's, 63 points. That's the margin right there, but stoppages and turnovers. This one really jumped out at me. Marks inside 50. I was surprised we got it this many. We got 9 to their 17. They scored 5 goals, 7 from marks. 5 goals, 7 from their marks. They scored 7. They marked it inside 50 17 times, which really goes to our defensive system. We really lacked both. I thought Steve May got an absolute bath. As bad as I've seen Steve May play, or as well as an opponent has taken him to the cleaners. But he got, to be fair to him, without Lever, he got no sort of third man in support. And I thought Petty was poor in that regard, and T-Mac wasn't that much better either. So, but still 5-7 from marks, 17 marks inside 50. That's a lot to give up. Inside 50 entry. So again, this is my point about the way Hardwick's playing and the way he's got the Suns playing. And I noted this was similar to last year. So, for all this talk about Melbourne, dominating inside 50s and not putting the score on the board, well, the Suns dominated inside 50s. They had 25 more than us, 40. We could only manage 40 to 65. One of the positives, like if you want to find one out of that, is they were actually relatively efficient scoring going inside 50. Better than them, we were 53%. They were 35 or something. But they smashed us for total inside 50s. And so 40 to 65 is a remarkable number. Tackles inside 50, I really disappointed in this one, and it goes to our weaknesses, I think, in our forward line. We're just not putting enough pressure on in our forward line. We talked about that last 2 weeks, actually. Down 8, minus 8 for tackles inside 50. They laid 12 tackles inside their 50, and that pressure was evident. At the ground, it was really evident how much more pressure they were applying inside 50. Again, that's the second week in a row. Post-clearance hardball gets, again, like I talked before, post-clearance contested possessions. This is one of the ways this feeds into that data set. Hardwick loves this stat, well, post-clearance, but post-clearance hardball gets, they smashed us down 6. We could only manage 9 post-clearance hardball gets to their 15. This one, I've talked a lot about the tracker speed. So on tracker, it's got the information for you can get some data on running. One of the best bits of data is average speed in defence, and it's a bit of a misnomer, but what it means is average speed. What it means by average speed in defence is when the opposition has possession of the ball, so anywhere on the ground, not just in defence. So when the opposition has the ball, the average speed of our players, for instance, in this instance, compared to the Suns on the ground, get this. So average speed in defence, and this really is a great barometer for work rate because it shows how much effort's happening to cover off, to create the zones, to push up into players' space, to reduce their time that they've got to release the ball. It is really the cornerstone. That sort of running's the cornerstone of all team defence, and it has been in the past our absolute one wood. And so our average speed in defence, number one on the ground of average speed in defence was Xavier Lindsay, 10.7. Now he's off the ground 2 minutes in. And it just goes to, show how, there's probably a bit of his misnomer, obviously, small sample size, but he was a really important player for us to lose. It really, really knocked us about structurally, similarly with Jefferson last week knocked us about structurally losing him. But the next four players were all Suns players. So Butterick, Touk Miller, Closey, and Rao. They rounded out the top five. So we only had one player in the top five for average speed when the Suns had the ball. It's just not good enough. It really, and you could see that's what it looked like live. It really did. And and the one player that we did have, you can't really count because he was only on the board, only on the ground for 2 or 3 minutes. So they killed us in their effort and want and their running powder. The Suns scored from set shots. This really jumped out at me. 10 goals, 8 to 2-5 from set shots. So they had 18 set shots. They just killed us. And inside their 50, just how they dominated once they got the ball inside 50. And there's a question later on about how to tackle this style of play, this sort of style that everyone seems to be loving at the moment, the fast ball movement, which the Crows and the Hawks are the ones everyone's talking about. As I said, Hardwick's taking a different approach, and he is playing more of a forward half territory, contest-focused, stoppage-focused game, and putting pressure inside 50, and that's what they did to us. Inside their 50, they recorded 73 disposals to our 35. So it's disposals are kicks and handballs, possessions are different. So 75 to 35 disposals inside their 50. That's unbelievable. And they took 17 marks to our 9, as I noted before. And inside their 50, they had 37 to 10 contested possessions. That's unbelievable. So we were down 27 contested possessions for that stats. 37 contested possession inside their forward 50. They deserve to win and could have won by more, I think. The Curious, these both could be under ugly as well, but we'll put them under Curious this week. Our first back-to-back 50-point loss since 2014. So read that again. Our first back-to-back 50-plus point losses since 2014. So it's over a decade since we've had 2 matches in a row like that, which was, so for there to be no bounce after the Roos match was probably the most disappointing thing about the day, and maybe why I was so frustrated and upset leaving the MCG. And this one, I don't even know what to put to this one, but I saw it and couldn't believe it. The Suns scored 9 goals, 1 to. We only managed 2 points for this. For this, they scored 9 goals, 1 from the 15 to 30 metre zone. They get 9 goals, 1 from inside the 50 to 30 metres from goal arc to our 2 points. I mean, it says a lot about how they tic-tacked from us, or how they but also about how, again, another team cut us up with their small players when the ball hit the deck. We've just got to get a way to defend that better, and we couldn't get any flow. We couldn't get any balls out the back, despite the fact that we, in fact, did pretty good with our back half ball movement, a point that Maxi Gawn makes in his bizarre, what I thought was quite a strange post-match interview in the change room. So that one was, I don't reckon you'll see that data point too often in that's normally a sort of number you might see in a 100-point loss. But it really jumped out at me. So that is the stats file this week, Andy.
There was another one for you curious, Ben Man. That was, I think it was Jake Nile in The Age today pointed out that in the past 9 games we've conceded over 100 points 5 times. Between 2020 and 2023, 91 games, we only conceded that 3 times.
Yeah.
That is absolutely damning about where we sit at the moment compared to, obviously, premiership years and then the build-up and subsequently.
Yeah, and it speaks a bit to what my comment last week was, for all the talk about the forward line, as I said last week, my big concern is our defensive half. And I saw it again on the weekend. Now, of course, they're all interconnected. You just, like the way they were bringing it out of the centre, you can't expect any defence. But we no longer have, that's part of the thing is that if you took a lever out 2 years ago, we had the system to be able to protect. We talked about it all the time on the podcast. Our system could cover a loss like lever. It no longer can. Like, he's a top 5 player for us. We cannot cover him, particularly when Steve May plays the stinker that he played. And we can't rely on the system. We're caught between 2 stools at the moment in terms of our system. So that is a damning stat. And the other one that, to be honest, is really quite sobering is one that Andy put. I don't know, you put it in maybe it was in the podcast thread about how many wins is that from our last 18 games?
5 from 18.
5 from 18.
Yeah, that's like walking back from out of the MCG to the train station. I normally meet a mate after the game for walk back to the train station. I said, look, I'm going to Richmond. Normally we walk together to Flinders and dissect the game a bit and catch up. And I said this week I'm going to Richmond. He texted back. He said, you want some alone time? I said, 100% I need some alone time. So, and it was one of the thoughts I had is, I'm getting jack of this, going to the MCG and watching us lose. So.
Welcome to 2013.
Yeah.
And welcome to the wonderful world of MFCSS. We're going to get you, big man. We're going to get you.
It won't. It feels very much like 2019. That's how it feels. And there's a question we'll unpack that a little bit. But and the commonality between the 2 seasons is trying to implement a new game plan, a new method, and the challenges that come with that. And most of all, the challenges are felt defensively.
Well, let's get into our listener questions. Our senior players are right in the gun of many disgruntled supporters at the moment. I'll read out the feedback that we've been receiving about them. Jaden H10 writes, I'd really love to know why the only 4 players who seem to consistently care for the first 3 game. Sorry, let me start again. I'd really like to know why the only 4 players who seem to consistently care from the first 3 games are our first 4 draftees. The rest would rather be anywhere else. Pathetic from senior players. El Diablo 14 says, how many senior players should we be unloading this coming off season? We are truly in a rebuild. Bluey's dad says, David King mentioned post-match that they could have shown footage of Petrarca, but it would be cruel. Any idea what this might be? I assumed it's off-the-ball footage we're not able to see on the telecast. And Forgotten Old Acquaintance writes, I think we're all aware of the players we're missing at the moment and the talent and the skills they can bring. But do we have too many senior players that are oblivious to how poor their skills are? I know you've mentioned previously that there are probably a few that are permitted to take risky inside kick, but I saw Gawn try it at one point rather than hitting up Bowie, resulting in a turnover. Viney and Petrarca consistently do it. The game is going past these players very quickly, and I think the coaches need to provide them with the reality check ASAP. What do we do with the problem that is Jack Viney? Where does he belong now? We extended him until 2028, and right now I would rather not see the ball in his hands at all. I can see a role for Petrarca in the forward line where his disposal maybe isn't as important, and Oliver is still smart enough to play in the middle and brings X factor. But I can't see much value in Jack these days. Would much rather Rivers or Langford in the middle. Radish D says something is clearly very wrong behind the scenes. The senior players seem disinterested at best on game days. What's the cause of this? Coaching, players, positioning, game plan? Does the panel know if these things are different on the training track? I recall the early word from the track was that energy, talk and spirits were high. Has that changed? Moreover, is the club going to do something about this before the season's end? And I got some audio from Ruse too.
Oh, hi guys. Thanks so much for the pod. Listen to it every week. It must be really hard to get up and about for it at the moment. It's Ruse 2 from Brisbane, just with a couple of one really hard question about one of my favourite players. Okay, so our vice captain, Jack Viney, he's beginning to look a little bit like a typewriter in the computer age. You know, he was perfect for our sort of contest and defence game that we had that won us the flag. He was pivotal in so many games, but at the moment he's looking slow, and we know that he, usually can't pick real well. So with Harvey Langford coming in the team, who's sort of like, a little bit like Jack Viney, but better at the moment, is there room for Jack in the team? I mean, I want it to be yes, but I'm not so sure. And on the second thing, and this is just silly probably, but is there any universe where you'd put Max as a sort of a rotation just in the forward line? Because Tommy Campbell, every time I've seen him, he seems fine in the middle. He did really well in the North Pracky match. And Max could play that BBB role, you know, take the top, the big defender, the main defender. And I don't know, maybe if we could persist in bombing it in, maybe at least having a, 220-metre ruckman up there to mark the ball, even though he can't kick, might be better than nothing. Anyhow, guys, love the pod. Still believe in the D's. Still going to fly down this Friday from Brisbane to Melbourne and then to Geelong. And, go Redleggers.
Some scathing commentary there from our listeners. They're not alone in their thoughts and opinions. D's social media, it's been pretty brutal in their commentary to our senior players, the leadership, our coaches and the game plan, and we'll tackle some of the latter shortly. But for now, George, our senior players, our leaders, your thoughts?
There's a lot of things to unpack here and a lot of questions. And I think in a way they're all intertwined with what we'll talk about later with game plan and coaches and their futures and things like that. So I'll try and stick just to the senior players.
Yeah, the senior players.
And for me, I've watched a couple of other games on the weekend as well. What really struck me for a start was the difference in the attitudes on the ground, or perceived attitudes on the ground, between our senior players and the Bulldogs. The Bulldogs were missing Bontempelli, Treloar, Garcia, Waitman and Johannesson. And this is after having traded out McRae, Daniel and Bailey Smith. So they've got 7 or 8 players missing from their side from last year alone. And yet they absolutely gutsed out that game on the weekend. It was really a real sharp contrast between what we're seeing from them compared to us. But I think we've got a very fundamental, basic problem that we're just starting to see. The fact is, we've won 5 of our last 18 games. I think and as who was it? Forgotten old acquaintance said, I think the game's gone past all what were our A-grade players. We won a premiership in 2021 when these guys were, 24, 25, 26, and a few of them were a little bit older. And we've been absolutely, utterly smashed in the last 2 games by guys who are, guess what age? 22, 23, 24, right at the peak of their careers and outputs. We simply could not catch Rael. We could not catch Anderson on the weekend. That's just the difference in age. This is a really brutal game, and while people might think, and I'd agree, that 29 is not too old, unfortunately in the game of AFL, I suspect it is. The ones that Binman's talked about in his stats file about, people like Stephen May had a stinker, Tommy Mack had a stinker, Max Gawn had a stinker from my perspective.
Tommy Mack. Tommy Mack was our fourth highest rated player again. He had a good game, Tommy Mack. But go on, your point's well made.
Yeah. Gawney had a stinker, Viney had a stinker. These are all what were our A-grade type players, and they're all getting towards the end of their career and they're just being shown up. Unfortunately, we're going to see a lot more of it in the coming weeks, months, certainly over this year. Are the club going to have to do something about it? They certainly are, because they'll simply be forced into it. We were supposed to have a review of the football department over the last summer. And honestly, I don't know what's been reviewed and what the outcomes are. We've only seen Nathan Jones come in as the midfield coach and Mark Jamer as the ruck coach. So I don't know what has been done, but certainly the output from the team themselves hasn't been improved by any stretch of the imagination and probably has gone backwards. So it's not going to be pleasant to see. We're going to have to get rid of a lot of players come the end of the year simply because, firstly, they're too old and they don't have a long-term future. And secondly, we'll be forced into the situation that a couple of other clubs have found themselves that if you don't move people on when they have trade value, they just sit on the list for years and then you've got to make a decision like Richmond did this year, having lost the Cotchins and the Martins and the Rewalts. All of a sudden, they've got to get rid of 9/10 of their team to try and rebuild from the bottom up. So just on that point, I really am impressed with what the Hawks have done with their list over the last 5 years. They've done a great rebuild while everybody hasn't been watching. But they got rid of or traded out people like Hodge, Lewis, Gunston, O'Meara, Tommy Mitchell, and they've brought in people like Ginnivan, Meek, Barras, Battle, Chol, Eamon, Impey, and even Frosty from a couple of years ago. All of those players were plug-and-play players. The players that we've traded in, we had one on the weekend, or with Sharp makes it two over the same period of time. So they've built their list beautifully. They've drafted well. Of course, you can't do anything without drafting properly, but the trading, as I said last week, has been problematic for us, and the Hawks are a good example of how to do it.
There's no question. I mean, it's totally reasonable to question the senior players, and I agree on the body language and the the leadership, I guess, was interesting last week because Maxi was knocked for a substandard game by his standards. And, there was the commentary from Goody after the game about what might be behind that. Well, last week he had 11.7 player rating points. This week he had 6.6 or some such. So he's had I wonder whether he's had 2 games in a row as poor as this, in the last 4 or 5 years. I don't know. Just a couple of quick things. I know we've got a call on the phone, Andy. So they're just a couple of quick things. So I think it's totally reasonable to criticise the senior players, to question them. Adam the God on Demonland has been calling for something that I've come around to, which is moving Viney forward and being a pressure forward and putting him inside 50. And, we're desperately, and as I talked to the numbers before, we're just not putting enough manic tackle pressure up forward at the moment. Obviously, it doesn't help having Cos out, but, we're simply not. And he might be an answer. I don't think that the game has gone past track. And I mean, Oliver is not going to get any quicker. That's one thing. And he was good, but he got sprinted away from Rao. So I'm not sure the game's gone past him. The problem for both Oliver and Clary, and to some degree Gawn, it's just not as obvious, is they're not elite kicks. So, you think of a player like Cameron, who's around that age, is that his ability to kick the ball to an elite level really covers over some of that stuff. He's not like he's the same age. So it's a bit about surrounding those gun players with, having Colt playing regular senior footy, having Langford playing regular senior footy, getting Lindsay in there, getting McVie around the ball. So we really need, those young players to be playing basically. So, and that our guns like Oliver to be the cherry on top as opposed to driving it. In the way, to be fair to Collingwood, is exactly what's happening with players who are well older than those players in Sidebottom and Pendlebury, who won them a game 2 weeks ago, being slow and, but they're good decision makers, both of them, and then use the ball really well. So, I think the senior players have, including Fritter, including Steve May, need to, really demonstrate that they're in for it, and it's time for them to step up.
Okay, we do have a caller on the line. Thank you for your patience. Welcome to the Demonland podcast. Who am I talking to?
This is Rob from Maidstone.
Hey, Rob, how you going?
Yeah, pretty well, thanks. first time, long time. I love your work, guys, and thanks for putting it on each week.
Thank you.
Don't want to sort of get into the pile on with Max, but I was just wondering, did any of you guys see his post-match interview in the rooms, in the change rooms?
Yeah,
It's about a 3-minute one from YouTube.
I haven't seen it. B-Man did mention he saw it and he did send me a link. I haven't watched it yet. I didn't clip it. So I don't know. Do you want to call it? Do you want to, Rob, do you want to talk about it or get our comment?
I just sort of got two sort of points out of that hit home to me was that he, the stars, he kept referring to the fans at home, the fans watching on TV. He said that clearly about 4 times, didn't reference the 24K that were in the stands, which I feel not too bad a crowd. You look at other crowds that play GWS at home, and they're usually around there or relative to their membership base. So I thought it felt like it was a bit of a jab at the crowd, and it didn't sit well with me. Like that coming from the captain of the club when we cop it from the whole footy world week in, week out. Kind of hurt, a bit of a hammer blow after such a shit loss. Excuse my French. And then it also just felt nonchalant. Like it felt like he was a little bit, just didn't feel like he was hurting as much as all of us are. And I don't know. It just seemed like maybe, like you guys have touched on, like the mindset. There's something going on behind the scenes. Maybe there's a disconnect between the groups, something like that. But I just thought that interview, it just was all off, very fishy, and definitely just, in my opinion of Max, after listening to that, went down a notch. So, yeah, I don't know. It was a bit sad to hear, I felt, from the captain of the club and one of the greatest player probably I've seen in my life. I rock up week in, week out, and to hear that stuff about the fans at home or watching on TV, it seemed like he was having a crack. I hope I'm reading into it a little bit too much, but I had heard a couple other people say the same thing to me as well. So, yeah, I don't know.
B-Man, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, it's The Ox posted on the podcast thread on Demonland. He wrote on whenever the 30 was yesterday, there is something weird and drastically wrong here. A narrow, honourable loss followed by 2 losses by which any measure cannot be explained away just through loss of form. Give me a break. And a strange cryptic post-match interview from Max and not much better from S. Goodwin. Most of the senior players look totally disinterested, not what we were just talking about. Normally I'm pretty upbeat, but not this time, thank boys. And the funny thing about that was I opened Demonland and I'd literally just watched that post-match interview. It was in the rooms with Gorney, and we were going to clip it, but I'd literally just watched that when I read that that comment from the Ox, and I wrote that it's funny that it should comment on it because as I said, that I just watched it, but I had a really similar reaction. So what was the caller's name?
My name's Rob. Yeah,
Rob. I had a really similar reaction to the Ox and you. There's just something strange about it. There was. As I noted, I appreciate it's really tough, obviously, to do an interview after a sort of dispiriting loss, particularly back-to-back loss, our first 50-point-plus losses back-to-back in over a decade. But there was just something funky about how I can't put my finger on it, but it was quite a strange vibe. And he also... I didn't get the reference to the crowd because, it would have been nice to say, and for the people who came today and suffered through that.
Exactly.
That might have been nice. But, yeah, there was a kind of weird – he also referenced the back half. He said, look, we played better from the back half and, or something about transition or I think from defensive half. And so obviously looked at the numbers I spoke to before about actually not too bad an effort. But, yeah, I thought it was quite a strange vibe, and I could see why people might think, oh, hold on, is that pointing to something else? It's also the funny thing is they put him up after his worst game for the club for a long time. I thought he got 2 weeks in a row. He's been smashed by a big opposing ruckman, and why'd they put him up? Maybe that was why it was funky. Maybe he was thinking, why am I speaking now? Why am I the one who's getting put up? Why is it always me? I don't know, but I 100% agree and thought, hold on, there's something funky there. That's a weird. If anyone hasn't listened to it, it's worth listening to, and maybe I've got my wires crossed, but it was just can't quite put my finger on it. But yeah, I thought it was strange as well.
I think strange is the operative word. It was really strange. I've never seen anything like that come from Max's mouth. He's usually very upbeat, very jovial. Can be very positive about things, but it was just weird. Weird.
A bit dismissive as well.
Yeah,
like you tried. It was like, well, don't do it. Like, don't do the interview or be angry
It's the post-match interview for the club. To their supporters, so he's captain. He sort of has to. Do you want me to play it? I've got it on my phone. I've got it on my phone now. Let's see if this plays.
Max, a 58-point loss to Gold Coast at the G. Obviously a disappointing result. What's the feeling amongst the group after, no win on the board?
Sorry. First half was a good game of football. We thought it was. It might not be pleasant to the eye with the low score, but we were a bit fumbly, especially early. That stayed on for the rest of the game. But we gave ourselves a chance at half-time. Probably shot ourselves in the foot early in the third. Lost centre clearance. And then the fourth quarter, 2 weeks in a row, has been a bit of a write-off. And it's probably the most disappointing part, especially for people watching at home, is what we're bringing in fourth quarters. We're certainly fit enough. We've done an extremely long summer, as has all teams. We ran into a pretty good team today. They put a lot of pressure on us, and we weren't able to stand up under that pressure. So I love footy. The best thing about footy is we got a great chance to be able to recover tomorrow, rock up Monday with a big smile on our face, and get to work and put in the hard yards because we were a bit fumbly, and make sure we're not fumbly for the Geelong game, and get down the road, which I love, getting down the road on the highway and playing another game of football. I've been in worse positions than this. As much as I'd love to be winning, I love the adversity that we're in. I love the challenge that we now have, and I'd love to do it with this group. It's a pretty exciting group.
As you said, it's not ideal, no wins on the board round 3, but it is only round 3. As the skipper, what do you do to rally the vibe of the team, because there's so much more to the season, and I know that pressure builds every time the weeks go by with no win, but as skipper, what do you say?
Yeah, we had a few players probably out of form, me included. We try and get back in form. I've been out of form before. A lot of these players have been out of form before, and we just got to try and get back in, which is fun. It's fun to try and get back in form.
And obviously, as you mentioned, it was a bit fumbly throughout. Do you think that it's that connection between lines, trying to move up the ground and get those inside 50s up as well? Because that's something we were down in. Do you reckon that's something as well to work on this week in particular?
So hopefully people saw at home how we moved the ball from our back half in the first half. We were able to do it quite freely, and then we sort of fumbled our way forward of centre. That's disappointing. That's probably, people would say at home, that is a regular thing for us. But it's not a regular thing to be able to move the ball smoothly from the back half, so that's exciting. Gold Coast came out after half-time and played a completely different way defensively, and they made it impossible for us to move the ball. We've got to be better than that. AFL's incredibly hard, and there's a side that made it hard for us, and we weren't able to stand up. So I'm being a bit optimistic in this interview because it's round 3, but I certainly don't want the people at home to know that I'm not bitterly disappointed with how it started. We've been smashed in my part of the ground in stoppage 2 weeks in a row, which is flattening. But the optimism is it's round 3. We've got some guys that are out of form, and hopefully we can get back to work.
Yeah, I think he was actually really angry during that interview. I think he was saying optimistic stuff, but he didn't mean what he was saying, and that's why he said, "Don't think I'm saying optimistic things, but I'm actually friggin' pissed off." And I think he was really, really angry at whether it's himself, his teammates, other people, the game, but whatever it is, the stuff we're going to talk about shortly. But I think he was very angry. He didn't want to have that interview. I mean, he has to. He's the captain. He's got to front up, him of all people. He wasn't happy. I could tell. I know Matt.
I think that's probably Matt, reasonable defence, Andy.
I get what Rob, what you're saying about it was a bit strange, but I think it's borne out. He was angry and frustrated, and he was very distracted at the start of the interview. Like he didn't even hear the first question, especially if you look at the vision. But it was off. There was something off. Caller, anything else you want to add?
But also, I'd like to say that we.
That's it. I think. Just one last thing. I'd love to see a senior player dropped this week, just to make a statement, especially from Goody, because there's all this talk about it being a bit of a boys' club. So, there's a couple out there that could have a rest this week. So that'd be nice to see. Just as a statement.
Before you go, anyone in particular?
I suppose Viney for Pickett would make sense, but I would hate to single out Viney. Like, he's not that'd be rough on him. It'd be rough on whoever goes out. But, Petrarca, that would probably be the biggest statement, especially with his perceived lack of loyalty over the last sort of 12 months for the club. So, I wouldn't mind Petrarca going out. But, that's just my opinion.
All right. Well, Rob, appreciate it. Thanks for listening and thanks for calling in. Have a great night.
You too. Thanks.
Cheers. Thanks, mate. That was Rob. Thank you for calling in, Rob. B-Man, did you want to add something before about the Gawn thing?
I mean, the great call from Rob. I thought exactly the same thing. And Andy, though, you make a good point. He was clearly angry and he was probably just didn't have the sort of enthusiasm for the platitudes. No. But nonetheless, it was funky. And you know what? He might be really angry at his senior teammate. So that might be a real factor. I can't hear you, Andy. You're dropping in and out, mate.
It could be one of our connections. Well, let's go.
I had to laugh, though. The first half, we only scored 2 bloody goals in a half of footy at a perfect the MCG with no rain. So, he's damn right when he says the fans at home and the ones who are at the stadium can't have been too impressed. And, it's interesting, though, that he did talk about that back half stuff, but I didn't realise, just look then, it was the first time I've sort of even given it. They scored 7 goals, 2 in that third quarter, but it was actually our highest scoring quarter, 4 goals, 3. So, a strange interview. Okay,
where are we now? Okay, let's get on to the game plan. I think we're going to hear a lot about this game plan this year. What Say What writes, given that there's been so much talk both this season and last about changing the game plan to suit modern football, is the game plan the problem or those that are trying to execute it the problem? As a result, how many more issues will be caused if we try to revert to type as we tried and failed to do in 2024? Ross Millen says, there seems to be much argument about the game plan. I think we need to separate, is there a distinguishable game plan from our feeling about it, about if the game plan is the right way forward or working. Either way, it was clear from Goody's presser that the game plan is irrelevant. It's back to the fundamentals of contest and winning the ball. What responsibility, if any, does Nathan Jones as a new midfield coach have on what is happening in the middle in the last 2 games? Acquaintance B Forgot writes, hi guys, love the pod. Could the panel explain for me why did we need a new game plan? Seems like the old one worked okay when we restricted teams to around 60 points. But since we introduced the new one, oppositions are scoring against us with ridiculous ease. What is the benefit of the new system? Watson11 says, it looks like we have a confused playing group, not quite sure or believing in what they are doing. I have a view that with game plans, coaches either 1, copy the dominant team's game plan, or 2, develop a new method to counter the dominant game plan. Nearly every team are trying to move the ball more quickly from defensive half. That's because the zone that the Tigers and Melbourne perfected was so dominant, and it is the way to break the zone. Any ideas on what a game plan looks like to defeat the teams that rely on fast ball movement from defensive 50? This year's small sample size, there are 3 teams scoring more heavily from forward half, the Crows, Suns, Saints. They rank 1, 2 and 4 at score from turnover. What are they doing differently? Redleg Knowledge, right? No, I think we'll stop that there because we've got quite a long one here. So, guys, more on the coach and his future at the club shortly. But for now, we're talking about the game plan. And B-Man, you're our resident expert here, so take it away, B-Man. And then Georgia, if you want to jump in for your 2 cents about the game plan.
It was interesting because I had a sort of a chat with a poster on D-Milan, Jay Rogan, who had a similar comment to who was it, to acquaintance be forgot. Why do we need a new game plan? Seems like the old one worked okay when we restricted teams to around 60 points. Very similar. He is sort of where Jay Rogan made a similar point, and I totally get that perspective. Like, it seemed to be working. Why move to a model that isn't? But I think it really, that sort of perspective, I think I totally get it, understand it, and I wonder whether it's part of the dilemma or part of the dynamic for the senior players. So, for me, it really captures that sort of horns of dilemma is what I wrote today. We find ourselves both as a club, the playing group, but in particular us as fans, is that method that of contest first, forward half, all of that stuff was based on the Tigers' uber successful method, won us a flag. So, not that long ago, 21, made us extremely hard to beat in 22 and 23, and we couldn't sort of leverage that to a flag, unfortunately. The Cats basically copied that approach to win the 22 flag. And as noted, the cycle of football is teams reacting to the dominant method, the premiership winning method, and responding somehow. And the success of really, you look at that model was basically from the Tigers flag in 2017 to all the way through to the Cats flag in 22. So, 6 seasons. That was the way to win a flag. And the success of that method resulted in McRae for the Pies developing a game plan that would essentially, as noted, beat the zone defence that our game plan was built on, was to move it so quickly or quick enough to beat that zone. Or alternatively, it's not all about speed of ball movement. So it's not all about going fast from the back half. That's what that chipping it around is all about. It's stretching the ground, pulling the defensive zone apart. So you're not just kicking into opposition intercept marks the way teams would so often find themselves doing against us. Mitchell, George noted this before, one of the benefits that Mitchell has, and I think this is a real important point in terms of where groups are at, is that he came in correctly when he started, correctly reading the game, where the game was going, right from the beginning of his tenure as coach. He implemented a similar method from the get-go as the Pies at his time at the Hawks. He copped heaps, if you might remember, heaps of criticism, heaps and heaps and heaps, for many of the sort of decisions around trading that George is now complimenting. He got criticised for, and they got thumped a lot of big losses. They came out and lost their first 5 games of last year, came home with a wet sail, and now everyone's in love with their method. So I think it's fair to say that it's universally accepted now that the transition game is now the template for success. So that's where that sort of idea for me of the horns of dilemma comes in. We can't win a flag with our old model, and to win a flag, we need to adapt and develop a new model. The challenge is that we've talked about, we've got half a team built for an old model, and half we're trying to bring in players we're trying to rebuild a list and for a new game plan on the run. And history shows that implementing a new method is really, really challenging. Usually involves lots of losses, not to mention lots of frustrations. The Pies, frustration for fans. The Pies are a really interesting outlier in that the way how quickly McRae could swap their model around to being one that ultimately won him a flag in 23. But only for us, for evidence of how hard it is, one of the really interesting sort of ironies, I reckon, is you only need to look at our 2019 season and for evidence of how hard it is to implement a new method, because you might remember we went from being one of the fastest ball movement teams in the AFL. We were the best at one point from moving it from the back half. Basically, we were playing a model in 2017, 2018 that is very much our Hawthorn play, a little bit more chaotic the way we played in terms of kamikaze, moving it forward. So we went from being a super fast ball movement from the back half team to being a sort of defensive first zone defense system that won us a flag in 2021. But 2019, if you remember, was a nightmare season for us. And the challenge was implementing that new game plan. And we struggled all season, moving from that attacking, aggressive ball movement team we were in 2017 and 2018, where we could beat just about anyone on our day. We got to a prelim playing that model, to trying to implement this new defensive system. And we really struggled in 2019. And I think we're seeing signs of that again. And it really shows up in the defensive half, where it's so system-based and so, so drilled. And, I think that's the challenge we're finding ourselves in. We're right in the middle, made more difficult by the fact if you were to select 4 players to take out of our side to have most impact on our ability to implement the game plan that Goody is trying to implement, you would take out Lindsay, Cos, McVie and Windsor. They would be the 4 players you would remove from Melbourne's footy team to disable our ability to play a movement-based transition game of football. And that's who I could not believe it when Lindsay was out of the game 90 seconds in or 2 minutes in. He was so important to how we move the ball. You could see that already in his short career. Very short career, not really a career, he's 3 games. They're the 4 most important players in our team at the moment to implement a method. Forget Oliver, forget Petrarca, forget our back line, forget our forward line. They're the key players, and they're not playing, and they didn't, and it really, really shows. So we've got a big struggle ahead, I think, to be able to implement that method. We get those players back and include Colt in that mix as well, and then I'll be much more, prepared to look at whether, how that method's going. But I think part of the disconnect is that maybe the senior players aren't buying into this new method. That maybe they need to find a way to relook at the way they're playing footy, and maybe we do need to move some players. I wouldn't be dropping any of those. I wouldn't be dropping Track, but maybe someone like Fritter so a lot of challenges ahead, and it's not going to be easy. It isn't normally easy to change a method.
I think there's something more fundamental has occurred right across the board with all teams, and that was associated with the stand rules. That the coaches themselves have worked out a way to stop that fast transition from the back line by getting players to stand back 5 metres. So all of a sudden you don't get the handballs to the players coming past. You don't get the ability for the person with the ball to run past the person on the mark and start and initiate the defensive moves. I think that's across all coaches, and I think there's a lot of teams really don't know what they're doing at the moment, including us, because that's how they trained for the whole summer, and they've come up against this brick wall. Max mentioned it in his in that speech where he said they changed their defence and made it impossible for us to move the ball. That's what I think what he's talking about. Now, to date, I've seen a number of games, and there's 2 teams that I've seen are using something slightly different, which is the Hawks and the Lions, who are using the fast transition by kicking the ball. They don't stop. They just turn around and kick, knowing that the next player up the field is already in the right position. So they don't try to run it and they don't try to carry it. They kick it. Geelong are doing something different. They zigzag across the ground, back and forth, which is not dissimilar to what they were doing pre-2023. Oh, sorry, pre-2023. But I think there's all sorts of coaches are really in a bind at the moment. They've trained all these people for the fast transition, and they simply can't do it.
It's interesting because there's a bit too much emphasis. So there's a part of that question that I just wanted to touch on, Andy. The question was, any ideas on what a game plan looks like to defeat the teams that rely on fast ball movement from defensive 50? This year's small sample size, there were 3 teams scoring more heavily from forward half: Crows, Suns and Saints. They ranked 1, 2 and 4 at score from turnover. What are they doing differently? It's interesting because I think there's a bit of overemphasis, to be honest, on fast ball movement, partly because Hawks' sexy style of play, when the Pies were up and about playing their most sort of attractive football that everyone loved, it was all about the speed of ball movement. But George's point, you're right, George, is it's not it's not just about how quickly you move it. It's about moving it forward. That's the thing. Ball movement's defined as ability to move it from one end to the other, essentially, or to control the movement of the ball. And what the Lions are brilliant at, and the Hawks too, and it's what we're also trying to implement. So this is those short lead-up kicks that you're still moving down the ground, but that's a series of. I watched a game on the weekend. I'm trying to remember. It was on the Sunday. It was short. Saints do it all the time. A short series of lead-up hits. So it's just multiple lead-up hits. Some of them are lateral until you can work your way around the ground, but a lot of them are sort of on the 45 or even direct leading at them. It's what we tried to implement last year. It's what we've tried this year. The Suns shut that out, but we weren't running hard enough. We just weren't. That requires a player to run exactly like you said. It's got to be instinctive. You wheel and go, and you know already there's a player leading towards you, and so that's why it looks quick. So we're just, that requires a hell of a lot of running. And as I noted before, in our defensive running, we're not covering the ground in the way that, whether that's mental, I can't believe it's fitness. I bloody hope it's not fitness, because if it is, we're in a lot worse position than I fear if it's a fitness-based thing already. So partly that's attitude, but it's partly, as you noted as well, for the Lions, you watch them play, it's instinctive. I watched the last 5 minutes of that game. They won it because their system was so strong against the Cats that they instinctively knew where each other were. And that's when we played our best footy in 21 and 22 and 23. That's exactly the same. They knew exactly, everyone knew which piece of the puzzle they were and where they fitted. At the moment, we don't, because we're in between two methods. But just on that comment about the team, so what ways to do it? The recipe is simple. And this is what the game is. It's pressure, 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 and contest. That's what will win finals. All of those handballs under pressure will break down come finals. So Hawks challenge, for instance, and this is what happened to the Swans. Come final, the Swans were last year's Hawks. They're the team that everyone was raving about, how quickly they were moving it from the back half and the speed at which they were moving the ball. Everyone thought they were going to be unbeatable. They were, come finals, that method broke down. But the question was about, in terms of the Crows, Suns and Saints rate 1, 2 and 4 at score from turnover. What are they? It is too early in the year for complete sort of, it's very small sample size, but it's a bit of a misnomer because, yes, the Crows are scoring. They're scoring on 84.3. They're averaging from points from turnover, which is just unheard of. That is, so that, as a way of saying how unheard of that's 33 clear of the second. So that's 9 clear of the second one. That's Gold Coast. But defensive forward half transition, they're also number one in the AFL Adelaide at the moment. They're 54 points from their defensive half. So that's where footy's at. They are the best team at transitioning the ball from their back half. That's what people are talking about in the transition. That's what Max was talking about. And that's why I mentioned we average 30 when our average is 20. The Adelaide are scoring almost twice as much. Well, they're averaging almost 3 times as much from their defensive half as us, 54.3. Port's next with 44. And Geelong, then Brisbane, are all strong for the back half as well. And from turnover, that's why Adelaide are flying, the way they are. They're 84 points from turnover. Gold Coast, and this is my point about the method that Hardwick's playing. He is trying to implement a game, a Hardwick that Melbourne is trying to implement. Very similar. So they're 74 points from turnover and only 33 points from the back half. So, they're not much more than us or still a little bit more, but about what we scored from the back half on the weekend. So they're a turnover pressure team. So the answer to that question, how to defeat fast ball movement, it's the same as, it all comes back to pressure. It's still, and the contest, they're still the 2 most important stats in footy. For all the talk of 70% of the scores are coming from the back half and the importance of turnover, turnovers are created through pressure. It's your ability to hurt teams once you get the ball back. And we're not pressuring the opposition enough, and we're not hurting teams when we do get it back because we've got our best kicks out of the side.
Man, do you think things have changed as well? That 12 months ago, 2 years ago, it was all about the intercepting to get the possession. But just watching the game so far this year, the turnovers are occurring, but there's been some absolutely awful passages of play.
Yeah.
It's not surprising that Adelaide have got huge numbers from turnovers, or the Saints, because people keep handballing to someone 1 metre apart or handballing directly to the opposition, trying to do God knows what. And we're getting these turnovers and they're being killed as a result of it. So, but previously it used to be, setting the zone defence to get the intercept and then attack off that. It just seems completely different to me.
It is. I mean, I think you're exactly right. I would say that's a symptom more than the way the game's played, because that's how Melbourne, a good game for us in 21 and 22 and 23, you could tell because of our intercept numbers. And you put enough pressure on the ball carrier and force a dump kick into our forward line. Our model, that was basically our model. That's why we played one less down at stoppages and force a dump kick that Lever and May and, we'd kill them on. That's how we'd win the ball back. But you're totally right. That's partly going out because all teams are trying to, like on the weekend, who was it? They went around Taylor. They kept on talking, the commentators, about going around Taylor. All teams are trying to go around the key opposition intercepting marking player now. And with those short angle kicks into 50 or into the pockets, or basically, don't kick it to Stewart, don't kick it to Taylor, don't kick it to Lever, don't kick it to Aaliyah.
We kick it straight to those guys.
Yeah, so you're right, George. And partly I think that high turnover is because a lot of teams are gassed. Like a lot of teams are running on fumes because it's, as I've been banging on about, it's an unbelievably aerobically challenging game now. It's like not sustainable for a full season. And, under fatigue, you see it all the time is when mistakes are made, which is, again, why we can't afford to have our best kicks out of the side, because fatigue exacerbates poor technique. I think that's and the other point you make is a good one too, is this year everyone's experimenting with a long handball, it seems. So lots of handball chains. I wonder that model come finals. Handball chains break down under, the heat of finals, don't they, under the big games. So, it's amazing though, Adelaide's numbers, 84 points from turnover after 3 games of footy, averaging 84 points. That's more than I think that's almost literally more than our score, isn't it? Our average score.
All right, let's move on. Supreme Demon asks, has Simon Goodwin lost the players? Why aren't the Demons players responding to his instructions? What's going wrong with the team? To lose to Gold Coast Suns at the MCG is humiliating. At the break of Gorn says, would love to hear from the three of you on how bad does it need to get for the board to sack Goodwin? Would 0-10 do it? Would a bottom 2 finish do it? For transparency, I'm in the sack Goodwin camp, but those calling for his head now is fanciful this early on. But surely there would get to a point where enough is enough. Godey's responds saying, in my humble opinion, a coaching change should only happen once it's clear the players have lost trust or belief in the coach. Sacking a coach is a major move and shouldn't be made impulsively. If handled poorly, it can cause divisions among the players themselves, between the players and the coaching staff, or even with the club management. The fallout from that kind of instability can take years to repair. I wasn't around in 1965, but from what I've heard, Norm Smith's dismissal had long-term consequences for the club. We often forget how rare premierships are for coaches. Even the successful ones usually need years to get there. Goodwin won his in his 5th season. If a new coach only hits their stride by 2030, we might be looking at a list without Gawn, Petrarca and other current stars. And in hindsight, we might regret not backing them for one more run around in 2027. Honestly, I can imagine a worst case where Goody is gone after just one more bad performance, but there's no clear line in the sand. In the end, I think it has to come down to either a strong majority of the players or Goody himself deciding it's time. Well, that rarely ever happens. Wells11 says, I really hope I'm wrong, but my concern is that Goody may have lost the playing group. When you see things like drop chest marks, early 50-metre penalties leading to goals, repeated basic skill errors, and an overall lack of energy, it suggests something deeper might be off. Honestly, it brought back some pretty grim memories from the Neil days. You could sense from the start of the first quarter that the team just wasn't mentally switched on. Goody deserves huge respect. He's our only living premiership coach, but right now something doesn't feel right. What do you think? And Travie14 says the AFL shifting towards a defence-first approach where the goal is to force a turnover like a stop in basketball and then launch a rapid counter-attack. Right now, we just don't have the right personnel to fully execute that style. Players like Cozzy, Windsor and Lindsay will definitely help in that area. It's clear the season is about transitioning to a new game plan. Unfortunately, that shift might leave Viney behind, and it could also limit what Petrarca and Oliver what makes Petrarca and Oliver just so dangerous. That said, they're talented enough to adapt. I just hope Viney can adjust as well. The real question is whether Goody can survive this kind of shift. It's essentially a rebuild on the fly, and these transitions take time. I've always backed him, but history suggests coaches don't survive this period. George, is the writing on the wall for Goody? And if the losses keep coming, how much longer can he survive?
I can't give an answer to that. Unfortunately, a couple of our contributors really nailed it down that history suggests coaches often don't survive this period. That's absolutely true. Unfortunately, in gamers, in a lot of sports, when you're losing, about the only thing that clubs can actually do is get rid of the coach because it's an easy solution, but they don't look at the reasons why the coach is put in that position. These days, it's very rare for a coach to be incompetent. There's a few in the past that we've had in our club, and there's certainly been others in other clubs, but they're all pretty well capable these days. Like I said in the opening, we had a football department review at the start of this year, and I don't know what's been done that's so different. So the pressure's certainly on. If you keep losing, not just losing, but you keep losing by these substantial amounts, it won't look good. The impetus for the Neild removal was the 186 game in Geelong, and
that was
Wasn't
Bailey.
that Bailey?
Sorry,
That was
Bailey.
Bailey.
That's what happens. That Neild's performance wasn't all that much better. I don't think the problem's Goody. I think the problem is that we're starting to, that we've lost, or won 5 out of the last 18 games. This has been going on for quite some time. I think we're just seeing exactly a repeat of what happened at Richmond. You've got a fantastic side. You had a premiership window. You won your premierships, but unfortunately, the game goes past people very quickly. Hardwick was smart enough to get out before the door pushed him. He was hitting the rear end by the door on the way out. But that's the reality. This is a pretty brutal game, and unfortunately, the coaches are the ones who often get pushed out ahead of the players who are either aging or are not up to it in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, in addition to the in the questions there, Andy, Redleg Knowledge also noted in that question from before, where it sort of fits better here, is that he thinks, or they think, a new coach will be necessary at season's end to breathe life into the club going forward, because it is clear as day right now that our players are simply not playing for him. So, one thing that Demon fans have got is experience, especially if you've been around for a bit, experience in knowing, in losing coaches and knowing the pressures that coaches can go on. And, one of my good mates I've seen lots and lots of footy games with noted, I think I said this on the podcast, he said after the loss, even after the Giants, could Goody be in trouble with the loss next week? And, we 2 losses later, you think not, but, footy's riddled. Melbourne's riddled with events. I think back to that Bailey thing. One of the most remarkable things about that day and about him being sacked is we were still on the cusp of the finals. That was further into the season, but nonetheless, it was mid-season, wasn't it? We were still a reasonable chance of making finals that year when, I think that's the concerns Melbourne fans have, even with that interview by Max. And I take your point, Andy was probably literally just furious that maybe he was furious with his teammates. Maybe he was furious with a number of things. Maybe he was furious he was the one having to front the media again when just last week Goody was talking about he's got personal things going on. Maybe he's thinking, why can't Jack Viney come and speak to them? Why can't Clary? Why can't one of the other senior players? And if so, he's got probably every right to feel that. So how long can we expect Max to carry the club? But, history shows that, it's hard to maintain. This is Goody's 9th season. History shows that not too many coaches do too many more than 10 seasons. So, a couple of bad losses, and who knows what sort of pressure there could be. You'd hope they won't jump at shadows. The bottom line is that, you've got to pay credit to a club like Geelong. They've been able to rebuild multiple times under Scott, and I think he deserves a lot of credit, as does the club. George has talked a lot about our trading decisions, and maybe that's a factor worth considering. For instance, years ago, talking about why didn't we go after a player like Kelly instead of, we've got Salem and Hunt. So, those sorts of decisions have a long shelf life, don't they? But, if we had 3-4 losses, if we have a big loss on the weekend, history shows that it could happen, couldn't it?
I don't know if it'll happen this week. We've got then we have Essendon coming up, and I think we've got Freo here, and then the Anzac Day game. That could be the one.
Oh, yeah.
Gets beaten by the apprentice, Uze.
Yeah,
and then we can do a straight swap with Uze
about
and
the game review, George. The season review. Where's the actual response? Like, what was the actual? Where is the report that says these were the issues? Of course, they're not going to give us the specifics of it, but a fair bit of motherhood statements in there, and we've still got no CEO. So, we've or a home ground for that, home training ground for that.
Nothing to see here. We do have another caller. It's just coming in now, so let's grab that now. Caller, you are on the air. Welcome to the Demonland podcast. Who am I talking to?
Talking to David from Adelaide. Thank you.
Hey, David.
Nice to speak to you guys.
No, likewise.
Look, the query I've got is, do you think that there was an overreaction to the 222 and the 223 performances? I mean, in both those years, Melbourne was extremely competitive, only lost by very small margins, and their failures in the finals could easily be explained by some of the losses that they had towards the end of the year as players. And the response to that was to dramatically change the game plan, and it's just been completely unsuccessful. At the end of the day, you have to have a game plan which suits your players, which your players understand. It's not simply chasing other people's game plans because they happen to be the game plan of the moment in regard to it. And I'm wondering whether there's just been an overreaction and whether the sort of wholesale changes that they've attempted have really been that necessary.
B-Man, you're our game plan man.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I sort of spoke to that before, when I can totally understand that perspective. Bottom line is, we have recruited different players. We have gone out and targeted Lindsay. We have gone out and targeted. We've tried to improve our stocks, but up forward we have tried to add players with better kicking skills. Do I think we overreacted? I think we missed a opportunity to win a flag in 23, which will always, be sand in my shoes. I think, though, no, I don't think we've overreacted. I think that method isn't going to, the way we played is that other teams have found a way to defeat it. What I've been talking about the last couple of years is, I think what we're trying to implement, and that's what Hardwick's trying to implement, the Suns, is a hybrid game somewhere between that high pressure forward half game. That's how the Suns played against us on the weekend. Stifle us, make ball movement difficult, contest and pressure, while still being strong from the back half and moving the ball. And I think one of the things I love in footy at the moment is that there's a premium now, and this is what Mitchell was so clever in his trading in of players that he targeted. He did what his coach did, Clarkson. He went out and said, I'm going to get good kicks here. That's what I'm going to get. I'm going to get aim into the club. I'm going to get players who can hit a target, because he could see where the game is going. I take your point about, putting together a list or a method that's going to beat the current list. He was lampooned at the beginning of the 23 season, Mitchell, for saying, I am not developing a list for now. I'm developing a method, I should say, for winning a flag in 25 and 26. And everyone made fun of him to, uppity Mitchell coming in his first year of coaching. It's exactly what he's doing. And so, it's a bit harder for I think for a coach that's got a unit already, has won a flag in a particular method. Half of them are, played in a particular way that's got them the ultimate success. Got to find a way to get in their heads to say, well, we've got to play differently, but without throwing out the fundamentals. For Goody, the fundamentals are contest and defense have just been woeful in the last 2 weeks in those fundamentals. The team we played on the weekend, though, is who we want to play like.
Yeah. But that's my point exactly. I just put this to you. Let's assume we stuck with our game plan of 222, 223, with some addition of players, because obviously some players left, some attempt to improve the quality of the players. Do you think that our position on the ladder would be worse or better than what it is? And I put it to you, even if they did find out our game plan to some extent, even if it wasn't at the same successful levels of 2021, I bet you we would have been a competitive team in that top 8 contesting for finals. The point is, I accept that compared with some of the other teams going round, our skill level is lower. But we were still competitive, notwithstanding those deficiencies. And I'm just not convinced that what we're trying to do now is play like other teams when we had the core of a good team and the core of a successful is doing anything for us except losing us games. And in fact, losing what qualities we had. They don't seem to do anything at the moment. They don't have all the strengths we used to have. And at the same time, they don't have the quality players to play the other types of game which require higher skill level and higher speed. So unless you're going to wholesale change the team.
No, I agree. Look, to be honest, I agree that we'd be more competitive. We would have finished higher last year if we just stuck to the way we played. That's what Goody did in the end. That's what he admitted. The mistake that he made was to try to do that last season. The reality is it's not going to win a flag that method anymore. It's just a fact. And it's all about winning flags. It's not about being competitive and making 7th and 8th and dribbling around that. It's about winning flags. And, they've made what I think is the correct calculation is that method that brought us ultimate success is no longer a method that's going to win flags anymore. It might help us make the finals, finish 8th or 9th, but we don't want it to finish 8th or 9th. We want to win flags.
Well, I've been a member for 25 years more. Can we really survive as a club another 5 or 10 years of rebuilding? I mean, it could be argued that if we remained a competitive team for a large, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, always contesting the finals and doing incremental change, because the wholesale change and the wholesale rule build, there's no guarantee of success. And you can be out in the wilderness for 10, 15 years. I'm just not convinced. And also to change to the method which is now deemed to be competitive, which of course people will find out about that method, adapt to it and defend it, and ultimately it'll be surpassed. By the time we change enough players to adapt to that method, will take years. We can't just simply get rid of all the core players. Financially, it's not possible.
No, I think I understand that perspective, and I think for me, it's about winning flags. And the irony is, like, people were pulling their hair out for 2 years, fans saying that's not going to win us a flag. We need a new method. That's what I mean by the horns of the dilemma. Before is that if we want to, that's what playing out is what people wanted.
Yeah, but I've always disagreed with that view. I actually think we were very competitive 2-22-23. We played 2 semi-finals, albeit we lost them. But I just think there was a dramatic overreaction because we went out in straight sets and because the media made such a noise about it, which, of course, they never do for teams like Collingwood. Everyone, I think, got sucked in, that there was just something so fundamentally wrong we couldn't win. But the fact was we made 2 finals. And both those finals, you would agree, we came very close to winning it. It wouldn't have been much change to allow us to win those finals. I was there. I'm just questioning whether the reaction to 222 to 223 is merited or was it a gross overreaction, which is actually dismantling what strengths we actually had? But look, I understand where you're coming from, Ben, man.
Yeah, I'd see that perspective as well. I think the game's changed radically, and that, if you're not playing that method to some degree, I think you're right. There'll be other ways to work around it, and it's always that swing. But we weren't going to win a flag with the method. And I take your point. I agree. We should have won. I thought we were in good shape to win the 23 final. We easily could have, but
we were.
The game moves a fair bit in 2 seasons.
Anyway, look, I really enjoy your podcast, and thanks very much for having me on.
Thank you. What was your name again? I missed it.
David.
Oh, David.
From Adelaide.
David from Adelaide. All right. Thank you,
David.
mate. Call in again.
The Crows up and about. With particularly with their fastball movement.
I barrack for great teams. So, yeah.
I'm sure everyone you meet in the street, though, is is unbearable.
Yeah, learn to ignore it. Port supporters are worse. So,
yeah.
Good on you, Dave.
All right, thanks, David. Appreciate it. All right, that was David from Adelaide. Great call, fantastic, and I think we'll have to get you and David together, bin man. You can argue at that point out, but yeah, I mean, it definitely is something valid to what he says, but also to what you say, Binners.
I was talking about that in 23 as well, but I still think we're looking at a hybrid model. We're not fully trying to implement this Hawk style method, and it's still contest and defense and pressure.
Well, let's move on to the next one. Oh My D says, Bailey Fritsch has been struggling for form for some time now. Does anyone on the panel have any insights as to why this is the case other than his foot injury against GWS in Alice Springs? He couldn't miss for years, and he goes from a 6-goal grand final premiership winner to dropping chest marks and missing the easiest of set shots. Would we be better off trading him at the end of the season before he becomes a free agent? Jane02 responds, I made a point of watching Fritsch at the game yesterday. I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, but he seemed lethargic, disinterested, and only going at half pace. I got chatting to a bloke sitting behind me who told me that Fritsch's contract is up at the end of the season. Clubs are sniffing around, and in his opinion, Fritsch has checked out. What does the panel think? And we've got some audio from Redleg23, who had obviously sent in another voicemail that went over 2 minutes, but that voicemail never arrived. But you'll get the gist of what he has to say from this.
So I'll make it quick on this one. So I just think that it's just shocking for our younger players and up-and-comers to be able to see a guy that just is not getting near it, not doing anything for the team, when it's his turn. And he just keeps getting rewarded with games every week, I don't care if he's one of our only goal kickers. I don't care. I think a statement by the coaching staff needs to be done. He can't play this week. And even to the point where I'm happy for him to even stick it out in the twos for 2, 3, 4 weeks. Couldn't even care less if he kicks 3 or 4 weeks if he wants to get dropped. Make him do it again. Because he's entitled. He's playing as though he's entitled. He's playing as though he's Teflon Don. And this is the result of it. So we can talk about the game, and I'm sure you guys will obviously, really get stuck into it. But in terms of Bailey Fritsch, he sums up where we've been at lately. And that blunder and that passage of play late in the third quarter, which just sucked all the energy and sail out of us, that was just almost the perfect storm that had come together for Bailey Fritsch. And I wasn't even disappointed. I felt that was actually probably a good thing. And hopefully that is the catalyst to making sure that this guy doesn't get a game for this club this week. Drop him, goodie. Thanks, boys.
Very harsh, but maybe warranted. Bin man, what to do with Bailey Fritsch? He's clearly not performing to expected standards. He's probably not alone there. Do we need to make an example of him? Can we afford to make an example of him? And or can we afford not to?
Where I've landed on it, I don't think we should be making an example of him because it implies that he's done something wrong. I think we should drop him because he's not playing at good enough footy to be playing senior footy for us. That's how I see it. Like, as I said, week one, and then again last week, he's got plenty of credits in the bank, but he's spent them for me. That's it. He's out of credits, he's out of form, and he should be at Casey. And we've got the perfect opportunity to swap it this week because we'll talk about it in a bit. I just love Daniel Turner's game getting dropped back to Casey. He was everything you want from a young fella who's been dropped back to the Magoos. He was our best player, dominant up forward, kicked 5 goals, went back in defence when needed, took a couple of 2 or 3 match-saving marks, was probably the reason we won the game. He comes, in my view, straight in for Fritter. Not so much about, an example, but I think there is an element of the senior players need to show some leadership. And, it's that moment that sucking the air out was the perfect way to describe it, Andy. You could feel it at the ground. It felt like a balloon had popped. It was just a shocking bit of play. But the other thing was Tuke Miller, he lines up. And one of these goals, I was sitting right behind him. It never deviated. It was to the punt road end, which was the tricky end. It was really, again, another really windy day at the MCG, by the way. If you're watching on telly, it was actually really, really swirly. And it seems to be the punt road end is the least protected end. He nailed it dead straight. Fritter had 2 shots that, like when he's sort of people who are supporting Fritter, and I'm a Fritter fan, to be clear. I love him, and he's one of my favourite players over the last 5-6 years. But he's the comeback is he's our highest scoring goal kicker for the last 5 years. Well, great, that is fantastic. And that his strength is he kicks goals under pressure, but he hasn't been doing that. So his one wood has now become a hybrid, and he's bloody hitting it out of bounds. And Tuke Miller shows the importance of standing up and delivering when needed, and Fritter couldn't do that. And so that's a 3rd substandard game in a row on the back of really poor end to the 24 season. I know he had ankle injuries and stuff going on. I'd be dropping him on not so much as a punishment as such or whatever. I'd drop him because he's not in good enough form to be playing footy. I 100% agree with Redlegs 23. Go back to the VFL, get some form, and bang the door down till you can't be refused a slot back in the ones. That's how I would play it. And I'd be disappointed, to be honest, if he isn't dropped this week.
Totally agree with all that, and I think the only reason he actually hasn't been dropped prior to this is that we didn't have any options at Casey. But after Turner's performance this week that we'll talk about, there is no. It's blindingly obvious that Turner should be coming straight into the back end of the side, and Fritsch won't be around this week.
All right, Demonised says, is Blake Howes being played in the right position? Maybe he's not a backman, but better suited elsewhere, George. I was under the assumption that when we drafted Howes that he was a mid-half forward wing. We've tried to turn him into a defender as the experiment failed.
Just going straight on to what I was just saying, we don't have a great number of options available to us, and we certainly didn't this week. The only other options was Adams at Casey. He played a reasonable sort of game. Was it any worse or better than what Howes has done? Probably much the same. The problem is that I've said many times, we don't have the depth at Casey when we start to run into the problems of trying to replace people that's needed. Adams is basically it at the moment. We lost. We had the previous years. We had a Tomlinson. Thank God we've got T-Max playing at his age. That's holding the back line together. But yeah, it's easy to say drop someone, but who do you bring in? I totally agree. Howes is doing as much as he can. Other people keep saying, get the games into the young ones. Well, he's one of the young ones because, with May at 3, T-Mac at 32, Lever's 29, Salem's 29. We're at the wrong end there. We need to be getting games into people like ours and ultimately Adams to look to the future.
I agree with that. And I think also just on we're building a new defensive system, which takes time. It's so reliant on people knowing where they're supposed to be in that puzzle. And so the only way to do that is being in the team. Doesn't help anyone pulling, your defensive unit apart, changing it week to week. We've already had to do that with May being out until round 3 and then losing Lever. Again, we've hardly talked about the fact that we've lost Lever, round 2 for May, I should say. But, I would be I'd be giving Howes a good run at it in that position. Did you notice, Andy? You wouldn't have seen it, but Petty got taken back. George, he went back for
Yeah, definitely did.
Which I thought was curious, all things considered, with him going forward with much ballyhoo.
Yeah,
going the other way. What am I talking about? He went forward. At one point, he was started back. I thought that was curious. What am I saying? I'm getting myself football dyslexia.
But I think that was more about, we'd shot ourselves in the footer yet again. When we got and Van Rooyen finished up in the ruck, I think, in the last quarter again.
Did. Yeah, AJ
didn't have all that great a game, but we're just robbing Peter to pay Paul yet again was this scenario. So what do you do when you haven't got a full forward and Max is off the ground on the rest and AJ's in the ruck?
Yeah, but I agree with you. Like, if that's the thing about the rebuild, and again, going to that horns of the dilemma. So you've got to keep a player like Howes in. If you think he's any part of the future, now's the time to be playing him. It's the middle age, it's the fritters, really, the ones that you can drop.
I think we'll skip the question about defence. We've sort of covered a lot of that, and I'm sure in the next couple of weeks the same question's going to come up about the structures or confidence. We'll get back to that. We got a bit on the fitness one. Shorty says, I get that we might not fully understand the game plan yet or have it all clicking, but how do you explain the constant fumbles and the clear lack of fitness at the end of games? People are calling for the coach's head, but shouldn't we be looking at Choco, the skills team, and the high-performance team first? As for our inability to finish games strongly, it reminds me of those mid-season loading phases. Gorn and others insist we're fit enough, but when so many players are coming off the ground late looking absolutely gassed, it's hard not to be concerned. Love the show. Our fitness used to be one of our one-woods that you love talking about, Big Man. George, bit of a concern? Still, we talked about it last week and the week before, I think.
It's far too early to judge at this time of the year. I mean, you look at the games are being played in ridiculous temperatures for a start. People are
except for our games.
But all I was making the point is that just about every side is really gassed at the end of games. They really haven't got into the swing of things. But if we've got a problem with fitness at this stage, we're in as serious problems. Just far too early to judge at this stage. I think you've got other problems occurring that aren't associated with fitness. Like I've been banging on all about this program. Age is a factor. It's hard to keep up with the young ones. The people around me got sick and tired of saying, is there anybody chasing Rowell? Is there anybody chasing Anderson? Is there anybody chasing Miller? And the fact is we couldn't chase them. That scene of Clary, who's not very fast at the best of times, trying to chase Rowell out of the middle wasn't the only circumstance in the whole game similar to that.
It was a shocker, George. I was going to say, I actually thought about it before the show. I was going to say that bit of play encapsulated the whole match for me. All my frustrations rolled up in one ball. Is the setup. I had the binoculars on Clary and Rowell at that contest. They were wrestling. Like, I don't know what Clary was doing. He was wrestling on the wrong side of the contest. Max hits it as if he was hitting it to Rowell, who ran onto the ball. Rowell ran away from Oliver, who looked like he had lead boots on, took a bounce, but then must have been 25 metres without bouncing it. That had to be too far. I could not believe it. Before kicking inside 50, just outside the 50-metre arc. It's like, come on.
His bounce was exactly opposite the dividing line in the centre square, and he kicked the ball exactly at the extremity of the centre square, which is 25 metres.
Exactly. That's what I said to someone. I said, that's a 25 metres. It's like, I could not believe it. It was all my frustrations rolled up in 10, 15 seconds of footy, including the non-decision, and they got a goal out of it. It was it was just unbelievable.
Anyhow, the upshot of it all is that, our players were shown up by younger players who are faster. And I expect to see a bit more of that, unfortunately, happening in the not too distant future.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, you're really not giving me any hope here, George. There's a lot of young, faster teams out there.
You can't make people run faster than they already know.
Well, that's again.
And believe me, as you get older, you get slower.
Again, I can't overemphasize the significance of having our 4 quickest players not playing, who are also our 4 best kicks.
Okay, well, this leads perfectly into our next one. Alex, no fancy name, says, coming out of the rebuild thread and digging through the stats files thread, I can't help but wonder, are we still in a sort of pre-season mode, whether by design or not? With so many team changes week to week and even mid-game, are we still searching for the right mix, especially through the middle of the ground? I'd be really interested to know, and maybe it's buried somewhere in the stats, how many different centre/midfield combinations we've trialled. Is there any hesitancy in our play? Maybe part of it comes down to not knowing exactly who's around you and how they're going to react. And by all means, feel free to reply with, yes, it's obviously part of the greater plan. In a couple of weeks, we'll have settled on the side that will take us deep into September, by which time we can complain about the ground being packed with bandwagon supporters. And Harvey Wallbanger responds, Windsor is expected to be back this week, was back in boots on Friday, also Cozzy, Lever and Spargo. Hard to imagine all of them not coming in together with Turner. You can probably guess the omissions, and Lindsay, of course, will not play. Please regard the following as facts, not excuses, having watched a lot of training. Number 1, the new game plan, seemingly in deep demand by 90% of Demonlanders, was developed over the summer on the basis of having McVie and Windsor running off half-back, both excellent users of the ball. Imagine them in the first 3 rounds with May, Lever, Bowie and Petty down back. We have never had that full formation this year, but we will have it minus only McVie on Friday night. 2, Rivers has trained all off-season as a mid, with Sparrow playing a high half-forward role. Both have had to revert to their old roles. On 2 occasions, the role changes were required in the first quarter due to injuries. We lost Jefferson, then Lindsay. 3, regarding the midfield, we have not been able to have the rotations through there that have been trained on all summer, mainly due to the number of injuries and the absence of Cozzy. Number 4, regarding the forward line, do they get a mulligan because of the above? Goody gave them one on Saturday, just 40 inside 50s. And for number 5, Fritsch playing high has not worked due to all of the above and the lack of form of JVR deep, but our opposition defences have had an easy time of it. It makes a lot of difference if the other elements, defence, transition and midfield, are functioning. Hopefully this helps if B-Man wants to provide Andy with some light at the end of this dark tunnel. So B-Man, you're going to need a massive light to guide me out of this dark hole. We've had an unsettled team this season, pre-season injuries and in-game injuries. They've no doubt scuttled the best lane plans of the coaching staff, and this happens to all teams. And I'm sure I'll concede we've copped it bad. Harvey Wallbanger makes some very good points and not excuses. He said facts. But does that explain some of the other issues we've spoken about over the past few weeks and all of tonight, incidentally? The lack of fitness, the poor attitude, the senior players, the poor skills, the lack of awareness, lack of pressure. Can all of that simply be explained away by things not going according to plan? Is bad luck the reason we're 0-3 as we head down the freeway to the Legion of Doom's headquarters at Cardinia Park?
No, of course that doesn't all explain it, and that sort of reductive thinking does my head in. It because how you just described it could be the way footy media talks about the game, and it just does my head in. Of course, it's not all could be explained away.
I'm gaslighting
but
you.
let's for the sake of argument agree with George's view about the relative strength or lack thereof of our list, right? And then also accept, for whether it's the right path to be on or not, that we are trying to play a game that's built around better ball movement, quicker ball movement, and players who can reliably take on high-risk kicks. So let's accept those 2 as fact. On the weekend, as I noted, if the opposition coach said take 4 players out of the Melbourne best 22 to prevent them implementing a modern transition football, they would choose McVie, Cos, or in order they would choose Cos, Windsor, or McVie, one of those two. And of all things, it says a lot about where we're at, Lindsay. Right, in terms of his kicking ability and moving the ball. It says a lot about the strength and skills of our senior players as well that I would put him so highly. But nonetheless, you take out 4 of the best players. And then you want to interrupt our defensive, I'd say take out Lever and take out May. And then if you wanted to go further, you'd say make sure it happens during a game, as Harvey Wallbanger notes, because then all of the systems that are they're in the growing stage. They're not even yet planted in the ground. They're at the risk of being blown away at the first strong breeze. Our systems and structures have to be changed on the day when we've hardly got them set in any sort of foundation as it stands at the moment. All of those factors. And if you throw in any external other stuff, like stuff we don't know about, maybe there is conflict, who knows? You add all of that together, and that's how you end up with big blowout losses, absolutely. So that is spot on from what Harvey Wallbanger, which, by the way, is a great posting name. It's spot on, exactly right. Of course, there's no magic elixir. There's no magic bullet. You don't just put those 4 players in and we're suddenly competitive. But we will turn. We kicked 2-9 in the first half. Maxi made the point, because obviously it was drilled into them straight after the match by Goody, is that's how we want to play. We want to transition the ball from the back half. We scored 2-9. If we'd scored 9-2, we would have won the game probably, or at least been super competitive in it. So, and those players that I talked about will help us impact on the scoreboard. It'll help us punish teams when we win the ball back off them, and it'll help them move the ball from the back half effectively. Cos back in, he has been the biggest out. You cannot understate the importance of him to our the way we play footy and want to go forward.
All right, let's move on. Can we turn it around? Genuine question, because I'm out of answers. Master Chief asks, do you think we can turn this form around without sacking the coach, overhauling the playing group or staff, or heading into a full rebuild? Can we steady the ship this season? I'm not after a detailed plan. Just wondering if the panel believes it's realistically possible. Buck Naked says, last year Brisbane was 0-3. At this point of the season, have the wheels fallen off? Is this a slow start, or are we just not that good anymore? George, it's the $6 gajillion question. Can we turn it around? Will the cavalry arriving turn the tide of the battle? We don't even have our first pick in the draft to cling to this season. If it keeps on heading in this trajectory.
I think the cavalry was the US Army 7th Cavalry at Little Bighorn. They all just got massacred, so they're not coming either. Look, I can't see us turning around. We'll improve from where we are, because we'll bring in players, particularly Cozzy, who will make a huge difference to the way the team operates. We'll start to get back a couple of these other players that we desperately need in the team, like Lever. The problem is, and while everyone says, Brisbane was 0-3, well, Brisbane weren't being beaten by 10 goals at that point. So I can't see us getting a great number of wins this season. We will hopefully become competitive again. I hope that the younger players coming through, and unfortunately the younger players that we do have coming through, aren't the ones to replace May, and they aren't the ones to replace Max, and they aren't the ones to replace a T-Mac. They're all good, fast runners, but that's going to take time. So I think we're up for a rebuild at some stage. We've started it, I think. But there's a long way to go, and we have to put up with as much pain as Hawthorn supporters have put up with for the last 5 years.
Well, I wouldn't mind putting up with that sort of pain, because they turn things around pretty quickly, and the Hawkers. So I think that's not an unreasonable view, but it sort of speaks to David's point before from Adelaide. The challenge in modern footy is, can you afford to go? I think we're doing a rebuild on the run. So I've certainly recalibrated my expectations. I think let's wait to see how it plays out when we've got all of those players playing together for a block of time, and then see where we're at. But it's going to be it depends what turning it around looks like if we can get a run on towards the end of the season. I think there was an interesting comment back there about the notion of, preparation. That's the Hawks absolutely were running on fumes early on and came home like a wet sail. Remember, the Hawks lost their first 5 games last year, and people were calling for Mitchell's head after their 4th and 5th loss. People have got short memories, but he was the most likely coach to be sacked after round 5 last year. And look at him now; everyone loves him.
All right, let's get moving because we're over 2 hours already. We've still got a little bit to go. The Casey Demons notched up their first win of the 2025 VFL season in a nail-biting 2-point victory over Gold Coast Suns at Casey Fields, despite fielding only 9 AFL-listed players against a near full-strength Suns side. Casey showed immense heart, leadership and resilience, led by new skipper Deacon Smith. Daniel Turner was the star of the show with 5 goals, 14 marks and 9 disposals, playing a key role up forward and later defensively in a tactical move by coach Taylor Whitford. Tom Fullerton supported well with 3 goals, while Bailey Laurie 30 disposals, Riley Bonner 30 and Riley Baldy 28 were influential throughout. Casey raced to a 36-point lead in the second term before the Suns surged back, narrowing the margin in the third and fourth quarters. With ruckman Tom Campbell going down at halftime, Will Varell stepped up admirably in the middle, 23 disposals, 10 clearances. The Demons held on in a tense final quarter with defensive contributions from Turner, Jed Adams and Edwards, sealing a memorable victory that briefly had them atop the VFL ladder due to being the only team with 2 games played. And George and Big Man, know that you both watched the game, so let's give us a brief rundown of some of the Demon-listed players.
It was an interesting game. There was about a 2 to 3 goal wind at the game heading towards the Casey City or the railway line sort of end of the ground. Casey took full advantage of that in the first quarter and opened up a very good lead. Yeah, I think it was close to half time or thereabouts. So they were basically 6 goals up. I don't know what happened to Tom Campbell, whether I didn't see anything. The commentators didn't seem to know why he was taken off the ground. There was nothing obvious from an injuries point of view, but whether he was taken off just in case something happened at Melbourne, but I don't think there was sufficient time to even get him to the ground. So a bit perplexing. One of those could be the club's mystery injury of the week coming up.
Well, I'll just quickly say that Harvey Wallbanger, who does some training reports, said that Campbell did some agility work with the physio, then joined the main group, and that was what he said about training today. So anyway.
Okay. The standouts were obviously Turner. He was fantastic. What really impressed me, apart from the 5 goals, I don't put great score on just goals alone, was the amount of ground he was covering up and down the ground when he was playing in the forward line. Then at critical times in the game, they were moving into the back line, and as Binman mentioned before, he saved the game with a couple of marks in the back line in the dying 10 minutes or so. He was just fantastic. He did absolutely everything to deserve a recall to the seniors. So just exactly what was needed. Casey only had 9. We only had 9 AFL listed players on the ground. Gold Coast had 17. And their depth is something to get frightened about when you look at some of those players. They had some big units in there, and they were young players. When you got people like Fiorini and Roses who can't get a crack in the seniors at the moment, that sort of tells you about the level of depth that they have available. Fullerton started all right, and then dropped a couple of sitters and missed some goals. Adams, as I mentioned, did a couple of really good things in the game, and but wasn't perhaps outstanding enough to warrant sort of movement. It's all about development for him, and hopefully he comes along nicely because, as I've mentioned, we've got a lot of ageing players in the back line, and we're going to need these sort of players like the Howes and the Adams to be able to take that step. Really impressed with, despite the fact that he didn't get involved a great deal, Noah Uze, who's not on our list, unfortunately. But he moves really smoothly. He just seems to be at the right place at the right time. Doesn't get involved enough in the games at this stage, but that's not unexpected from where he's coming. Seston was not selected. He was taken as emergency to the Melbourne game. Fell over the line by 2 points in the end. It was actually a very exciting game towards the end. It really was seat of the pants. Gold Coast had plenty of opportunities to ice the game in the end, but were unable to. But so very, very promising. It's good to see Turner's play as well as he did.
Yeah, good summary, George. Mentha, I thought, did a couple of nice things. Needs to get involved more, but did a couple of classy things.
All right, let's move on. Breeze through the changes. D's massive injury list continues to grow with young Xavier Lindsay set for a stint on the sidelines despite escaping the dreaded ACL prognosis. Based on last week's injury list, the only player that is likely to return, Jake Lever, although I think someone said that Goody mentioned that Windsor will be returning this week. So hopefully that happens. But then again, Lever was returned last week and then was laid out after serving his 3-match suspension that he earned in the final game of last season. Cozzy Pickett will make his long-awaited return to the team. And after Daniel Turner booted 5 goals, as we just heard in the twos, he too could well be in line to make a return to the seniors. Just quickly, boys, let's get into the preview anyway.
Well,
unless you have anyone you think's going to go out for some of these guys.
Well, I think Cos goes out.
Fritter
goes out for Turner. I think Lindsay's obviously injured and Windsor will come in for him. I think Henderson may come out, or Billings for Cos. And I think that will probably be the extent of the changes.
Unless Lever.
If Lever comes back in, will be interesting. That's an interesting one. He'll obviously come back in if he's ready, won't he? No doubt about that. Yeah. So, I can't see that. I can't see Howes you almost need now. You can't bring Lever.
You don't want to say T-Mac.
Yeah, so it could be T-Mac who comes out, though. Again, he was one of our better players, and it'd be pretty tough on him to. But that's George's point. It really is writ large, actually, is as much as I love T-Mac, if you've got an eye for the future and you've got those sorts of decisions to make, you've got to go with the future, and House is got to be part of our future. Otherwise, so maybe T-Mac for Lever, although it would be awfully hard on T-Mac. And
I think it'd be awfully hard on you, Bin Man.
Yeah, I would. I've been right so far, and he's been in. So yeah. It'd be interesting. Melksham's the other one, but I think Melksham, he'll probably play again. Did enough to play again. Sorry, George.
Yeah, I was just going to say whether we leave a T-Mac or a Howes as the sub, if nothing else.
And Howes
with Lever coming back because Lever's obviously a backman. It's who else do you take out? Who's the backman? And it's not that we want to take any of the existing, but we need forwards coming in, so to speak. Or as much as I love T-Mac, he also his lack of pace showed up a couple of times, didn't it? And so it's going to be interesting. Geelong, in terms of the preview of the match, the betting market's probably got there's a pretty sobering insight into where we're at the moment in terms of this match and just generally. They're $1.21 to win this game. We're $4.45 to win it. By contrast, the Suns are $1.71 favourite against the Crows. It's Sydney Swans are $1.57 against the Roos. So the Swans are shorter than the Cats are against us. So that's, it makes for pretty... North Melbourne are longer than... we're way longer than North Melbourne to beat the Swans, so it's pretty sobering. And, the Cats are interesting, though. Hats off to them. Before we get into that, looking at some of their numbers, Andy, their tackles inside 50, they're averaging 22 tackles inside 50 per game compared to we're mid-table, for instance, with 8 or something. And their scores from turnover, they're number 3 for scores from turnover, but critically, they're also number 3 from scores from their back half. So, they're a really well-balanced side. They like moving it from the back half. Stewart's really a key for them, the way they structure up.
I wonder whether there's at least some benefit playing at Kardinia Park because of how narrow it is. It's a ground that our lack of leg speed, and they've really developed quite a quick side now. They've done a great job of rebuilding on the run. It won't hurt as much as it would. They won't hurt us as much with their leg speed as they would if it was on the MCG.
They've got an interesting game style of zigzagging across the ground, but they do it very quickly. So it'll be interesting to see whether we're able to react to it with the lack of pace. But Stewart back in this week will make it. Well, it's just one more big positive for them. But what's interesting is Jeremy Cameron hasn't done very much at all. To date, they're using him a long way up the ground, but
almost like a winger.
But he's just not involved at the moment like he has been for the past couple of years. But he hasn't needed to because they've got people like Ollie Henry and who's that man mountain Shannon Neal.
Yeah, who looks every inch like an old school Pats forward, doesn't he? Like Wade in his heyday.
He's 206 or something ridiculous. He's going to be Darcy Mark II for the Geelong Football Club. I don't know how you're going to counter someone like him. He's got everything going for him. Their forward pressure is amazing. Stengel does a great job.
Stengel,
you just don't need. You just don't need them around you. They will punish you. And they're such great kicks as well. So
it's a good thing we're great when the ball hits the ground in defence. So.
And our lack of fumbling should really expose their sure-handedness.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll talk about it next week and see what happens. I think we'll leave it there. We'll be back next week to break down our game against the Cats. And oh boy, it could get ugly there. I'm just thinking 186 in my head, just going.
Don't think it.
They could break that.
Like think of this, Andy. We're going to win. It's going to be a glorious victory. We've had some great wins down at the category, haven't we?
It's the site. It is the site of one of our greatest victories, but it's also the site of one of our darkest days. So you never know what you're going to get down there.
I might watch the greatest victory before Friday.
If you want to listen to the show live as it happens, then please head on over to demonland.com on Monday night at 8 p.m. Thank you to our 5-star reviewers on Apple Podcast. Thank you to Monocular. Thank you to our voicemailers, Roost2 and Redleg23. Thank you to our callers, Rob and David. And, as always, your questions and comments are an integral part of the show. So thank you to our Demonland posters who submitted questions and comments. Thank you to the Jackson Fix, Jaden H10, El Diablo 14, Bluey's Dad, Forgotten Old Acquaintance, Radish D, What Say What, Ross Milan, Acquaintance Be Forgot, Watson 11, Red Leg Knowledge, Supreme Demon, At the Break of Gorn, Go D's, Wells 11, Travi 14, Oh My D's, Jane 02, Demon Eyes, Lefty, Shorty Short, Alex No Fancy Name, Harvey Wallbanger, Master Chief, Buck Naked. And apologies to the following people who I had to cut out. Otherwise, we would have been here all night. The Ox from Go to Woe Woden, Rhino, Dice, Youngblood, Leave It to Diva, D Old Fart. And I think that was it. Thank you to my co-host, Georgia Bibman. And thank you to you, our loyal listeners. Don't forget, leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts. We'll read it out on next week's show. Go Demons.
Go Red Leggers.